Welcome to another lesson. If you've ever tried to manage a project using a combination of sticky notes, a group chat, and sheer optimism, you already understand exactly why the Gantt chart was invented. A Gantt chart is, at its core, a visual timeline for your project. It shows every task that needs to happen, who is responsible for it, when it starts, and when it ends, all laid out horizontally so you can see the entire project in one view. Think of it as the musical score for your project. It shows who's playing which instrument and exactly when they need to come in, so the whole thing doesn't sound like a middle school band practice. And just like a musical score, a good Gantt chart doesn't just tell you what's happening. It tells you whether things are in sequence, where you're at risk of a collision, and whether you're behind before it becomes a crisis. In this video, we're going to cover three things. First, a quick overview of what a Gantt chart actually is and when to use one. Then, a tour of the best modern tools for building one, ranging from I just want it to look pretty to I need to manage a small army. And finally, a full step-by-step walkthrough of how to build one from scratch in Excel, which, yes, is more capable than it looks. Let's get into it. So when was this tool first developed? The Gantt chart was developed in the early 1900s by an industrial engineer named Henry Gantt, which means it predates spreadsheets, computers, and most of the problems it's used to solve. The fact that it's still the dominant project planning format more than 100 years later tells you something about how well it works. The structure is simple. On the left side, you have a list of tasks. Across the top, you have a timeline, usually broken into days, weeks, or months. And in the middle, you have horizontal bars that show when each task starts, how long it runs, and when it ends. The length of the bar equals the duration. The position of the bar tells you where it sits in the overall timeline. So when should you use one? Well, Gantt charts are most useful when you have a project with multiple tasks that need to happen in a specific order, multiple people involved who need to know what they're responsible for, or a deadline that the whole team needs to be working toward. If you're planning a product launch, onboarding a new client, running a marketing campaign, coordinating a team event, or managing any kind of multi-week initiative, a Gantt chart is your friend. What they're less useful for is ongoing, cyclical work, things like weekly support queues or recurring operations. For that kind of work, a Kanban board or a simple task list is a better fit. But for anything with a clear start, a clear end, and a sequence of steps in between, a Gantt chart is exactly the right tool. One more thing worth understanding before we move on, and this is where a lot of teams get value they didn't expect. A Gantt chart isn't just a planning document, it's a communication tool. When you share it with a stakeholder who wants to know, where are we on this? A good Gantt chart answers that question instantly, without requiring a meeting. That's worth a lot. Now, before we dive into Excel, let's take a quick look at the dedicated Gantt tools available today, because for some teams, one of these will genuinely be the better choice. There are 5 worth knowing about. Starting with TeamGantt, this is widely considered the most beautiful dedicated Gantt tool out there. It's built specifically for people who find Excel a little intimidating, and the interface is genuinely enjoyable to use. You can drag and drop bars to change dates, tasks snap into place intuitively, and the whole thing just feels polished. If your priority is something that looks great in a client-facing presentation, this is probably your first stop. Next up, Monday.com. If you like color coding, big picture views, and a tool that your whole team will actually open on a daily basis, Monday is excellent. Their Gantt view, they call it the timeline view, is clean and fast, and it integrates naturally with your team's day-to-day task management. So instead of maintaining a separate planning document, the Gantt chart is just another view of the work your team is already tracking. Then there's InstaGantt. This one is specifically worth knowing about if you already use Asana. It's a plugin that takes your existing Asana task lists and turns them into professional-grade Gantt charts in essentially one click. If your team is living in Asana and you just need a visual timeline on top of that existing structure, InstaGantt is hard to beat. Moving on to ClickUp. What makes ClickUp interesting is the ceiling. Even on the free tier, it has a solid Gantt view. But the tool is also built to grow with you. You can start simple, then unlock more advanced features as your projects get more complex. If you're the kind of person who prefers not to migrate to a new tool every time you level up, ClickUp is a sensible long-term choice. And finally, Toggle Plan. This one is for people who genuinely dislike complex project management software. It's essentially a colorful, horizontal calendar that shows you who is working on what, across time. No deep configuration, no learning curve, no fluff. If you want the visual clarity of a Gantt chart without any of the overhead, Toggle Plan is the most accessible option on this list. So, which one should you pick? Well, it depends on your context. If you're working solo, or on a small team, and just need a clean, shareable timeline, TeamGantt or Toggle Plan. If your team is already living in a project management tool, integrate with that Monday, Asana via Instagantt, or ClickUp. And if you want full control, maximum flexibility, and you're already comfortable in spreadsheets, that's where Excel comes in, which is exactly where we're going next. All right, building a Gantt chart in Excel from scratch might sound like the harder path, and honestly, it has a few more steps than dragging a bar in TeamGantt, but the payoff is a chart that's entirely yours. No subscription, no login, no tool telling you what you can and can't do, just a spreadsheet that does exactly what you need. We're going to build this in 4 phases: the data setup, the calendar header, the conditional formatting that actually creates the bars, and the finishing touches that make it look like something you'd actually be proud to share. Before you touch a single color, you need to build the engine of the chart, and that engine lives in columns A through E. So let's start with column A, task name. This is your list of project phases or individual tasks, whatever level of granularity makes sense for your project. Be specific enough that whoever reads it knows what's actually happening. Marketing is not a task. Draft campaign brief and get sign-off is. Next up, column B is owner, the name of the person responsible for each task. This column might feel optional, but it isn't. A Gantt chart without owners is just a timeline of things you hope will happen. With owners, it becomes a document of accountability. Moving on, column C is start date. Format these cells as short date. You can do that by selecting the column, right-clicking, choosing Format Cells, and picking short date from the list. For the very first task, type the date manually. For every subsequent task, we're going to do something more interesting, but we'll get to that in a moment. Column D is duration, the number of days the task will take. Simple whole numbers, no units, just the count. And column E is end date. This is your first formula, and it's a small one. In cell E2, type equals C2 plus D2 minus 1. The minus 1 is there for a reason that seems small but matters. If a task starts on Monday and lasts 1 day, it should also end on Monday. Without that minus 1, Excel will calculate Tuesday, which is technically 1 day later, but not what you mean. The minus 1 corrects for that off by 1 error. Now, here's a genuinely useful trick, and it's what makes the whole chart dynamic. Instead of manually typing a start date for task 2, go to cell C3 and type equals E2 plus 1. What this does is link task 2's start date directly to task 1's end date. So if task 1 runs long and you update its duration, task 2 automatically shifts forward. Do this for every task in the chain, and you have a chart that updates itself. It won't prevent scope creep, but at least it'll tell you about it immediately. With your data set up, the next step is building the timeline that runs across the top of your chart, the horizontal axis that all your bars will eventually sit against. In cell F1, type the start date of your project. This is your anchor point, the leftmost column of your timeline. Everything extends to the right from here. In cell G1, type equals F1 plus 1. Then click the small green square in the bottom right corner of cell G1, that's the fill handle, and drag it to the right for as many days as your project lasts. If your project runs 60 days, drag out 60 columns. It sounds like a lot, and it does make your sheet wide, but this is what creates the day-by-day granularity of the chart. Now here's a visual cleanup step that makes a real difference. All those date values in row 1 are going to be shown as full dates by default, something like the 1st of March 2026, which makes each column wide and the chart hard to read. To fix that, select all the cells in row 1 from F1 to your last date column, right-click, choose Format Cells, go to Custom, and in the Type box, delete whatever's there and type just the letter D. That's it, just D. The result is that your header now shows simple day numbers, 1, 2, 3, and so on, instead of full dates, which lets you make the columns narrow and the chart compact. This is the step that actually turns your spreadsheet into a Gantt chart. We're setting up a rule that tells Excel, if the date in the column header falls between a task's start and end date, paint that cell. When every matching cell in a row gets painted, you get a bar. Start by selecting your grid from cell F2 down to your last task row and across to your last date column. This is your canvas. Go to Home, Conditional Formatting, New Rule, and choose Use a Formula to determine which cells to format. Now type the formula. This is the one moment where precision really matters, so go slowly. It's on screen and in the description below. A quick word on those $signs. They lock a reference, so it doesn't shift when the formula copies across cells. The dollar before the 1 locks the row, so every cell always looks up to row 1 for its date. The dollars before C and E lock the columns, so every cell always checks the right start and end dates. Without them, the bars show up in the wrong places. Think of them as anchors. Click Format, go to Fill, and pick a color. Mid-blue or teal both read well. Avoid anything too light. It'll disappear on a projected screen, and avoid red, which reads as a problem. Click OK twice and watch the bars appear. Now let's make it look like a tool, not a spreadsheet. First, the Today line. This is a thin, vertical marker that moves across your chart each day to show exactly where you are in the project. Select your grid, go back to Conditional Formatting, and add a new rule. The formula is on screen now and in the description. In the Format settings, go to the Border tab and apply a border to the left and right sides only, not top and bottom. Set the color to bright red or orange. What that creates is a pair of vertical lines that together form one visible marker. Every time you open the file, it'll be in a new position. Next, the grid lines. Select your grid and apply all borders, but change the line color from black to a very light gray, the lightest shade on the color picker. This gives the chart structure without noise. You want the borders to help the eye navigate, not compete with the bars. Finally, freeze panes. Click in cell F2, just to the right of your task names and just below your date header. Go to the View tab, click Freeze Panes, and select Freeze Panes from the drop-down. Now when you scroll right, your task names stay visible. When you scroll down, your date header stays visible. It's a small thing that makes daily use much less frustrating. And there you have it, a fully functional, dynamically linked, professionally formatted Gantt chart built entirely in Excel without a single subscription or plugin required. More broadly, remember that a Gantt chart is only as useful as the discipline behind it. Build it carefully at the start of a project, keep it updated as things shift, and share it proactively, rather than waiting for someone to ask. Done well, it's the single artifact that keeps a whole team aligned without requiring a status meeting every week. And if you find Excel's approach a bit too manual for your taste, well, now you know exactly which tools are worth exploring instead. All right, you've got the framework. Go build something on time,